親愛なる皆様、こんにちは。乃木でございます。この度、私が翻訳を手掛け、ヒカルランド社より近々発売予定の偽の神との決別の著者ジョン・ラム・ラッシュにインタビューをいたしました。インタビュー開始前にラッシュ氏から日本の読者へ向けて自己紹介を兼ねたメッセージがございますので、まずはご覧くださいませ。
I want your listeners to know that I've been to Japan. I lived in Japan 2 times. And I love and admire the country and the culture of the Japanese people very much.
Okay, thank you.
When I was there, I lived in Tokyo.
Tokyo.
And I lived in Tokyo, but I've also been to Nara, Kyoto, Osaka, Hiroshima. I've been to the inland sea, the inland sea. And I've, of course, been to Kamakura, Yokohama, and had a really important time in my life when I was 19, 20 years old in Japan.
Oh, wow, 1920s. Wow. That's a lot of places you visited.
I really mean it, even though when I say I love the country and I love the culture, I'm not sure about the Japanese people. You are quite bizarre. And I think in some ways you are a mystery to the rest of the world.
Wow.
I do.
I think
I'll tell you something very briefly. This is a little story very briefly from Gnostic mythology. Okay?
Yes, please.
So according to my study of mythology and my study of the stars and the constellations,
yes,
there is a legend, and you can find this legend, hint of this legend in Nihonji. Yeah, and it says that the Japanese people actually lived on 2 other planets in the constellation of Orion. Orion, and that they lived on a planet around a star called Rigel and another star called Betelgeuse. And there were two clans of Japanese, and they lived on these 2 different planets. And then they came to live here, and they found the beautiful islands of Japan, and they closed themselves off because they knew through their ancestors, that they actually were human, but they came from another system. And those 2 clans from Orion were at war with each other. And that's the background of a lot of the wars that happened in Japan before it opened to the West. So that's a wonderful story. I bet that no one has ever heard that story.
Yeah, for me, that was the first time to hear this story. Wow. That's amazing.
Strange, huh? I think there's some truth in that story. So I did live in Japan. I had a really intense experience with 2 Japanese women, a mother and a daughter, strangely. Her name was Teru, and her daughter's name was Nobuko. And I almost at the age of 20 made this choice to live my life in Japan.
Wow, at the age of 20.
With Nobuko, of course. And I thought that if I did that, I would study Aikido, because I met the great master of Aikido at his Zendo, and that I would become a carpenter so that I could build my own Japanese house. So that's what I wanted to do at 20.
That's a good ambition. Yeah.
So it didn't work out that way.
Mhm.
I returned to the United States. I thought I would go back to Japan, but I didn't. But I did study Japanese. And I actually remember one sentence from my class in Japanese. One
Okay.
sentence.
What is
Can
it?
I try to say it?
Sure, of course. Please.
Okay. Taro wa mainichi gakko e ikamasu ka?
Is Taro going to the
School every day.
school every day? Okay. Yeah, that works.
So today, all right. Is that good? Not bad,
Yeah,
huh?
sure. Yeah, that was perfect.
So we're going today to the Gnostic school, and we have a lot to talk about. So let's begin with your good questions. You can lead the conversation.
Okay. ありがとうございました。それではインタビュー本編の始まりです。どうぞご覧くださいませ。I am Nogi, and today I will be interviewing John Ramlash, the author of Not in His Image, a book that is said to have transformed the lives of many people around the world. I am a translator of Japanese edition that will soon be released by publisher Hikaru Land. And this Japanese edition has not been released yet, but it is going to have a great impact on the religious and philosophy of life of many people in Japan. The subtitle of this book is Gnostic Vision, Sacred Ecology, and the Future of Belief. And here I think for many Japanese readers, the word Gnostics does not ring a bell. Many of them may think of the scheme that was formulated also in Japan that reads, Gnosticism is early Christianity. So Mr. Rash, could you please define Gnostics from your perspective as a modern Gnostic?
Certainly. This is a good place to begin. You see, the difference between Gnosticism and Christianity is huge. First of all, Christianity is a belief system, a religion, but Gnosticism is not really a religion. It is a path of knowledge, a way of knowing yourself, knowing what is humanity, knowing the origins of humanity, and many other things. So, although many scholars say that Gnosticism was just a sect of Christianity that was discarded, this is not true. This is not correct. Gnosticism in the ancient world was a vast movement called the Mysteries. And the Mysteries were centers of spiritual development and education. And so the Gnostics were seers, meaning they could see things. They had occult abilities. They were trained to perceive the world in a deeper way. And they could see things by paranormal perception. And so Gnosticism is Gnosis today. Gnosticism is dead and finished. It's an ancient movement. But Gnosis today is a path of knowledge. And one of the first things it teaches is the evil and the deceit of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
I see. Thank you very much. The book goes into great detail about the shamanic philosophies of pagans and Telestai is that the name that the Gnostics call themselves, right?
That is exactly the name. In fact, they didn't use the word Gnostic because back in the ancient times, it was the people who hated the Gnostics and wanted to destroy them who called them Gnostic. It was an insult. Here you can translate the American slang. If I call you a Gnostic, it means you smartass. You think you know it all, right?
Right.
It was an insult. They didn't call themselves that. They called themselves telestai. You pronounce it perfectly. And it means we who are aimed, we who know our purpose, we have direction, we are aimed. That's what they call themselves.
I see. The book then goes on to explain how the church fathers and the other powerful figures try to eradicate those ancient teachings. And most of the evidence has been destroyed. So the Nag Hammadi codices is a valuable source of raw information from that time, protected from such destruction and revived in modern times. However, most of the time it is misunderstood to be the same as Dead Sea Scrolls written by early Christians. So, so Mr. Rush, would you like to explain why the two ancient documents are so mixed up, please?
Well, the truth is that these documents, especially the Gnostic writings, are quite a mess. They are really contradictory and they're very fragmentary. And both the Gnostic writings of Nag Hammadi and the Dead Sea Scrolls are subjects for experts, for scholars of religion. And it's quite difficult for the ordinary person to investigate these subjects, you see. Now, I'll answer your question in two ways.
Okay.
First of all, the evidence of the Gnostic movement of the mysteries is very small. I compare it to, imagine that you had a huge mosaic description that covered the entire wall, and it was a picture of many events with gods and goddesses in it and human beings. And a bomb exploded it so that there are only a few fragments of this mosaic that you can gather in your hands. You have to construct the Gnostic message in that way. And it's extremely difficult. And I am the only scholar who is not an academic scholar.
Okay.
I'm a renegade. I'm an independent scholar. I am the only scholar who has actually reconstructed the myth and the message of Gnosticism, the ancient teachings. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found at almost the same time.
Yes.
They were found in Israel, near Jerusalem. The Gnostic Nag Hammadi books were found in Egypt. The Dead Sea Scrolls should never be confused with the Gnostic writings because they are the writings of a fanatical sect of Jewish ideologues, Jewish religious people, and they are the foundation not only of Judaism, but also of Christianity. And the Gnostic teaching is against both Judaism and Christianity. So never confuse those two.
Right. Thank you very much. That becomes very clear that the difference between Dead Sea Scrolls and Nag Hammadi codices. So here, let me explain a little about the general religious views of the Japanese people. And Japan has traditionally had relatively a small number of followers of monotheistic religions such as Christianity. In the 16th century, the Jesuits were actively campaigning to spread Christianity in Japan. But the shogun, the general of the time, found out that they were buying large numbers of Japanese children as slaves. And he issued a decree to expel the missionaries. This is recognized as a fact written in Japanese history. So even today, Christians are sometimes viewed with suspicion and fear there. And there are also a great number of people who have a psychological aversion to religion in general, because the stories about the supremacy of the male creator God, sin and atonement, the divinity of the Savior, resurrection, and the final judgment from on high remind them of the terrorism caused by the cult righteousness and messianic madness in the mid of 90s. So, Mr. Lash, you are a well-known critic of Judeo-Christianity, and you know the Japanese people have difficulties to understand the concept you named in the book, Redeemer Complex. And do you expect the message of your book to be easily understood by the Japanese?
Well, thank you for telling that story about the Jesuits coming to Japan. I know that story, and it is really important. Yes, I think there's a good chance that my book would come into the mind of the Japanese people today through a certain opening. You know, we have the expression, an open mind. And if the readers have an open mind and they allow themselves to think about what I say and use their own judgment, I think they will find that it is an entirely different message, and it is against religion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I am against religion. Think of me as Toshiro Mifune. Huh?
Yes.
I love Toshiro Mifune. I used to wear my hair like him when I was a teenager.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. So I'm like Yojimbo, you know, I'm like Sanjuro. You know, I am a samurai, and my enemy is the Christian religion.
Oh, wow. I see.
And many people say, who have read the book in English and other languages, they say that I really did take that samurai sword and I really cut that religion down and destroyed it. But I didn't do only that. I also presented something to replace it, which is the path of gnosis, which is a practice today that is not religious. And actually, that practice has a factor of shamanism.
Shamanism, yes.
And animism. Now, I would say, Nogi, correct me if I'm wrong, but you could define Shinto as a form of animism. Isn't that correct?
Yes, they don't have a certain male creator God. So, and they have a lot of gods derived from the nature. So you could say that, yes, animism.
Well, that's another good point of my book, because the Gnostic teachers of the mysteries also perceived the gods in nature. They saw that nature was full of supernatural and divine forces.
Mm-hmm.
And the most powerful of all those forces is Sophia, who is actually the spirit of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So Gnostic teaching is very compatible with Shinto and the native animism of Japan. I'm sure that is true.
Indeed, indeed. Yes, exactly. And we live in a time when the importance of the ecological movement is being emphasized. And your book says that the origins of the deep ecology movement lie in Gnosticism. The Gnosticists worshipped the ecosystem itself, or planet Earth Gaia, as the body of a goddess called Sophia. However, a cosmic anomaly called Archon, which is the true identity of false god, came to invade the minds of the ancient Hebrews and tried to destroy the vision of the Ion Sophia. Is now the time for us humans to remember and reconnect to the Sophianic vision of life? What do you think, Mr. Rush?
Well, I think this is the moment. And I am, of course, the individual who has made that opportunity. I propose to the world, let's return to animism, but in a new and modern form of animism. And let's begin by the recognition that the earth itself is a divine spiritual being, and it is intelligent, and it has emotions. It's like a big animal, you see. In Gaia theory, which is a scientific theory that came to the world at the same time that the Nag Hammadi was translated in the 1970s. In Gaia theory, they call the earth a super organism. Well, what is an organism? It's alive. You're an organism. I'm an organism. An elephant is an organism. A whale is an organism. But the earth is not, of course, a human organism. It's a planetary organism. Yes. But the beautiful message of Gnosis is that you, as an individual human, and I say human animal, you know that. I don't say human being. Right. You, as an individual human animal, can actually interact and communicate with the great planetary animal. That's the practice of Gnosis today.
I see. Beautiful. And I think many Japanese will also be very curious about Sophia and the Archon and their own cosmic origins. In your book,
I'm sure they will. And
yes.
I would be very interested to see, excuse me for interrupting you.
Not at
I would be very interested to see how the Japanese people respond to the message about the archons in my book.
Yes, exactly.
The message about the archons is really important to the whole story of the earth.
Yes. So you revealed in a book how the initiates long ago met with Ion Sophia herself through their theistic method of the mysteries. And can you give us a brief explanation of the mysteries of Eleusis so that we can learn more about the mystery school of ancient Europe?
Certainly. Well, there were mystery schools and groups of the Telestai in all of the countries of Europe before Christianity. Yes. There were in Scandinavia, in the British Isles, in Spain, France, Germany, all around Europe. It was a vast network of schools. And there were general principles that all these schools agreed on, even though the practices were different in different countries, because the way you would practice something in Sweden is not the way you practice it in Italy, because the country is different and the weather is different and the people are different and they speak different languages.
Yes.
But there were many types of Gnostics, such as the Druids of the British Isles. They were Gnostics. And they all agreed, however, on two fundamental things. The first was the story of our planet, the sacred narrative, which I call the fallen goddess scenario. So they all had different versions of that, but it was basically one story. And it was that story, because of that story, that they said, we are aimed. We are aimed because we know the true story of humanity. We know who the mother goddess is. She's right here with us. And we know how to carry that story forward and preserve that story. So the story is very important. The other feature of the Gnostic teaching is the method. They had a particular method. Now, the animistic people everywhere, in the Japanese islands, in China, in Polynesia, all around the world, had different ways of looking at the Divine Mother, the Divine Earth Mother. And they called her by hundreds of different names. And as animistic people, they felt her presence and they interacted with her in all the particular ways of their culture. However, the Telestai, the teachers of the mystery schools, had a very sophisticated way of connecting to the Earth Mother. They did it in a practice which is called telestic. That's from the word telestai. Telestic trance. Now, telestic trance means a directed trance. It means that you go into a trance, but you do it in a directed way with a purpose. You don't just go into a trance and channel spirits and have your mind go like one place to another in the supernatural. It's a discipline. Now at Eleusis, they practiced this trance. I'll tell you exactly how they did it. In fact, there were many mystery centers like Eleusis, but it's the only one that we really know quite a bit about, okay? So in the trance, they met in groups of 12 or of 2, 4, 8, and 16. It was very controlled. And they drank a psychoactive potion. The potion at Eleusis was made from fermented barley. And what happens with fermented barley is that grain of barley that grows in the field can get a fungus on it, a purple fungus. And actually that fungus has properties of a psychedelic or psychoactive power. And they knew this. So what they did was they carefully prepared this potion at Eleusis and many other places. And they also used mushrooms, by the way. Okay. And they prepared it, and in a disciplined situation, not just carelessly tripping, oh, I'm going to take something and going to have a psychedelic experience. No, they did it with discipline, and they used this trance to reach a state that is not your ordinary state. It's a higher state of concentration. And in that concentration, they went to the presence of the wisdom goddess, Sophia, and they perceived her in a particular way that you cannot perceive in normal life, an intimate way. And they actually conversed with her. They asked her questions. And when she responded, they took the knowledge she gave them and they developed it into arts, sciences, and all forms of culture. So they were the advanced teachers of the ancient world, And their method, which they kept among themselves to protect it, was the method of the telestic trance, you say. And Gnostics today still do the same practice.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's very interesting story. And also there is your interpretation of Eleusis pediment. This is extremely fascinating. The sheaf of cut wheat, a rosette.
Sheaf of cut wheat.
Yes, and the pillar here. And it is also...
Yes, the pillar.
Mm-hmm. It is also curious.
And the rosette.
Rosette here.
Yes.
Yes. And there are 16 petals of rosette that matches the number of 16 initiates in the Orphic sacramental bowl. And
Exactly.
In the natural world, does the fixed number 16 have a great significance as well? Please give us your thoughts.
It has an enormous.
Oh.
Yes, it has an enormous significance. Huge. And I'll tell you what that is in a moment. I'd like to comment about those images on the cover of my book.
I see.
Okay.
Yes.
A sheaf of wheat, barley, a sheaf of barley, a rosette, which has 8 petals inside and 16 outside, and a pillar, a column, right?
Yes.
I can assure you that no religious scholar in the world would be able to tell you what that means unless they had the same experiences that the Gnostics did.
Okay.
So because I have practiced the telestic trance many times, usually I use mushrooms, okay? I have practiced in the same way that they did, in exactly the same way, because it's a simple method and it's the best method. And so I was able to explain those images on the cover, not because I'm a scholar, but because I'm a shaman who practices and I know what they mean, you see?
I see. Yes.
So obviously the sheaf of wheat means that this is the source of the psychoactive drink. It comes from the fungus on the wheat. That's what the sheaf of wheat is.
Yes.
The rosette is a model of a mystery cell. The cells were highly organized, and the biggest cell was 16 people. Then they would sometimes meet, if circumstances were different, there would only be 4 people or 2 or 8. So there were 8 primarily in the inner cell. And you are absolutely right. There is other evidence to prove what I'm saying in another artifact called the Orphic bowl, which is pictured in the book. And there you say a beautiful bowl, flat bowl, with 16 men and women. They always did it with equal men and women, lying with their feet together. And in the center is a serpent, which represents the serpent power of the earth itself. When you meet the planetary animal mother in this trance, she sometimes appears like a serpent. She feels like a great serpent. You don't necessarily see her as a serpent, but you can see in that trance, if you practice it correctly, like a mountain range, like you have the mountains of Japan, you have the famous mountain at Kamakura. What is the famous mountain?
Kamakura.
Yeah,
don't have the name.
by the sea. What is the most famous mountain in Japan?
Of course, it's called Fuji Mountain, Fuji-san.
Yeah, Fujiyama.
Yes.
Excuse me for forgetting.
Uh-huh.
Everyone has seen Fujiyama, right?
Right.
Imagine this.
Mhm.
Imagine if you're a Gnostic and you practice this method, and then you look at Mount Fujiyama, it would move.
Wow.
It would move like a living animal. You could see the sides of Fujiyama moving like the sides of a tiger when it breathes. This is a very powerful thing to see, and it's real. It's not an hallucination. And many people can't take it because it's so powerful. Sometimes they get sick, like seasick, because the motion of the earth, which is happening all the time, when you perceive it directly, it's very, very powerful. And you have to be strong and clear in order to maintain that perception. And that's what the Gnostics did. And that's what groups of people do today. So I also teach about how to do this method of trance. It's very unique. There's nothing else like it, but it is basically a shamanic practice.
Wow. So you are called, how is it called? High Elephant, the advanced priest of that knowledge.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I don't call myself that, but technically speaking, yes, the initiate, the shaman who can show other people how to do this and who can take them to the presence of the divine Earth Mother is a hierophant. A hierophant simply means someone who shows the mystery, shows you the sacred. You see?
I see.
That explains the third image on the cover. What is the pillar? There's a round pillar, right?
Yes.
What does this pillar represent? Okay.
Okay.
Again, no religious scholar can tell you this, what I'm telling you now, because they don't have the experience. They only have concepts. One of the things that the Hierophant did at Eleusis was to take the neophytes, the new people coming in, into a place called the Telesterion. Again, there's that word, telest. It means purpose, end, okay? And the Telesterion was a room that was covered, and there were many pillars, smooth pillars of marble. Now, there was very little light in the Telesterion. They performed the mysteries at night. There's a reason for that, and I do the same. The reason is that it's easier to see the luminosity of the earth in the darkness. And what they would do, they would have some torches around, but it would not be very well lit. So they would take the new shamans who are training to a pillar, and they would stand them all around this pillar. And then, in a very subtle way, I explain this in my book, in great detail. In a very subtle way, the Hierophant would show them, by looking at the pillar and the white marble in the firelight, how to see the organic light. And the organic light is the actual radiance of the earth. The earth is radiant, but you don't normally see that radiance. What you normally see is nature. You see the clouds, the ground, you see the trees, the ocean, the rivers. That is all the clothing of the divine Mother Earth. When she strips off her clothing, you see her naked body. And that is a light, a very unique light, unlike any other. So the great event of initiation for those coming to the Hierophant was that the Hierophant showed them how to see this light. that's the secret of the mysteries.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very interesting, profoundly interesting. I mean, the Japanese readers must read this book to find what the mysteries are. The book I translated into Japanese is the 15th anniversary edition. And this book, this version contains a great exposure of the COVID vaccine scam. You call this caveat, right?
Yes, caveat. I don't know if you can make a Japanese word, but caveat is a
caveat is fine.
Caveat. It means Soviet and COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why is COVID Soviet? Well, COVID is a psyop. The whole COVID-19 virus is just a big psyop. And the purpose of this psyop is to lead the world to a transhumanist nightmare of communism. And I make this point really clear in the 15th anniversary edition. Obviously, in the first edition, COVID didn't exist, so I didn't mention it.
Yes, exactly, you did. And there are also the agenda of the Great Reset and crime against humanity and the ideological distortions of the technocratic elite. So this version exposes the dystopian world vision promoted by the cabals. And that is what we humans are experiencing today. And these demented elites, whoever they are, of course, under the influence of off-world archontic parasites. It is easier for us to assume that the archons are evil. But according to this book, the Gnostics did not call them evil. You also talked about Gnostic theory of human error in the book. This theory explains how Archon is involved in the process of people making mistakes, which I found tremendously interesting because I feel like it explains here why people make inhumane mistakes. Let me quote page 288. Not all that operates in the human psyche originates there. Let me repeat. Not all that operates in the human psyche originates there. Could you elaborate a bit more on what this sentence means for the listeners of this interview?
Certainly, with pleasure. And by the way, your explanation and paraphrase of what the book says is super good.
Oh,
thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Wow.
One of the greatest pleasures of a writer is to know that the reader really gets what he says, you see? So this is the great topic, which is about the nature of evil, the origin of evil. And it's a profound topic, and I talk a lot about it in the book. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'll explain it in this way.
Yes.
The myth of Sophia, and we say Sophia, not Sophia, but whichever you like. The myth of Sophia explains the origin of the human species. Mm-hmm. The human genome was designed in the galactic center by these two aeons called Sophia and Thelete. They are your divine parents. Her name means wisdom. His name means intention. You are the child of wisdom and intention. That itself is a beautiful message. And so the way that they designed us is really wonderful. They calibrated the human genome, and they put into it certain talents, particularly 7 particular talents: creative, artistic talents, language, the ability to imagine things, intellectual talents. And then they did that so that when the human being emerged in a planet where it could develop, that it would develop its talents. And different races show different talents. So they designed us so that we would learn by trial and error. That's how a human being learns. You explore something, you try something, it works, or you make a mistake, or maybe it doesn't work the way you want, but you continue by intention to develop knowledge and skills. Now, if there were no archons in the world, we would make errors and mistakes, but we would recognize them and we would be able to correct them and continue on the right path.
Right.
This paranormal influence, which does not originate in the human mind, causes us to not see our errors and not correct them. And as a result, there is a snowballing effect. Okay, you know that expression.
Yes,
It just accumulates. More and more errors accumulate due to this paranormal influence in our minds. And the result of that is evil. You see, it's not the archons who are evil themselves, but because they put malware in our minds, and because they influence us they damage our ability to correct ourselves. And so we behave worse and worse and worse until we commit evil because we have completely lost the truth. And we have lost the ability to know what is true. So today, the evil in the world is not due to the archons directly, but it's due to human error. And the archons use that to destroy us and to control us. So the psychopaths, the technocrats like Elon Musk are agents of the archons. They are not here to raise humanity to some higher level. They are here to destroy us through the psychopathic criminal insanity that they represent. You say, this is the message, and this is extremely powerful.
Yes.
There's a wonderful Gnostic saying, it's in the book, and I'm sure you've translated it very well. The Gnostic said, whoever does not know the root of evil is no stranger to it. That's a beautiful expression.
Yes.
So
yes.
Receiving Gnostic teaching today carries a huge responsibility. You must know what the root of evil is, because unless you don't know that, it will reach you and it will subvert and corrupt you. So one of the most powerful messages in my book for me is to go to what the root of evil is. And that is where you come to the religious sect of Zadik, the Zadikim. And I talk a lot about this religious sect, the Zadikim, in the first 6 chapters of my book. It's the Zadikim who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yes.
Yeah, this is very powerful message from you. And here I think there's a lot to be learned from these Gnostic teachings about our minds as well. Our mind are so quick to dichotomize things into good and evil. E.T. Archon phenomenon and enigma, UFO encounters, these kind of stories attract a lot of people's attention, but at the same time, they are trapped in distinguishing things between good and evil. Humanity cannot find its way to alignment with Gaia Sophia without noticing the trick. So to know your role on Earth is not to know yourself as a distinct individual, but to know who you are as a human species. Mr. Rash, you call this true identity species self-identity, right?
Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that the subject of the species self-identity is also extremely important in my book. And I worked very hard to get this concept across. Now, for me, it's really simple, but it's not an easy thing to explain because almost everyone, by education or religion or culture, has a lot of wrong ideas about this subject. So I've tried to make it clear in the book, and I'll try to make it clear to you right now, as in the shortest way I can. You see, it's obvious that every single human being, human animal, I say, has an identity. You have your identity. Fine, you need your identity. If you lose your identity, you lose your mind and you can't function. Mm-hmm. So you have a sense of your identity as an individual, but that alone is not enough. In order to fully know who you are and to become fully complete as a human being, you also have to have the sense of identity of your species. You see? The identity of the species. This is the species self-identity. And how do you get an identity of your species? Well, again, the narrative, the sacred story of Sophia, tells you not just who you are as John or Nogi or Julia or Nobuko. Mm-hmm. It tells you what you are. It tells you what you are. And you are a child of wisdom and intention. You are the evolution of a genome that was created in the galactic center and then projected out into the galactic arms so that it could grow in different planetary worlds. And other strains of our human species have grown in other planetary worlds. As a matter of fact, as you know well, the myth describes 9 experiments with the human genome that happened on other planets in this galaxy, previous to us. That's why we are called A10. Anthropos is the Gnostic word for the human genome. So we are A10. What does that mean? It means we are the 10th experiment to come out of the source of this genome, you see? So when you know what you are, you realize something that is really liberating, but probably will meet resistance in many people. I'm going to say this just in the way it is. You never see ever before you another version, another individual of humanity, of the total humanity. Okay. You only see a racial example. You see, when I look at you and you look at me, most people would think, well, here's one human being looking at another human being. But when I look at you, I don't see the pure total humanity. I see it in a filter, the filter of your race, you see? Mm-hmm. The lesson here is that the pure humanity, the total humanity, is only something you can imagine. You imagine it when you know the story. I imagine it all the time. It's very easy for me to imagine it. But that is a great lesson. And that is a place where many people drop it. They can't go there. It's too difficult for them, you see?
Yeah.
And so you see how that can be difficult.
Yes, I can imagine that. Mm-hmm.
And so to help them remember what they truly are, I quote a most beautiful piece of evidence from the mysteries. It's a tiny little square of gold, about that big. It's called the Patelia Amulet. I didn't quote that in the original edition, but I do now. And this Patelia Amulet is something that was given to those who had been initiated into the mysteries. They saw the organic light. They met the divine Earth Mother, and they knew their origin. And there are 3 lines on this little gold tablet. And this is what they say. I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but my origins are in heaven alone. You yourselves know this.
Beautiful. I think
that is one of the most beautiful pieces of evidence of the ancient wisdom. So you must know that as a human being, you're actually not universally human. Not everyone you meet is purely human, but the pure human seed is something that you must imagine. And I talk a lot about that, and I talk about where it is too. It happens to be in the constellation of Orion.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. So the human imagination and its role as a storyteller, creative animal, the ability to empathize with our mother's story is very sacred. And
totally.
Yes. And here Japan is known as a creative source of anime and manga in the world, and anime and manga. And I've heard that some of anime fans have successfully applied ancient Tibetan esotericism to create tulpas of their favorite characters. In addition, how to create a tulpa has also been shared extensively on the internet. Good writers often share the feeling that their created characters begin to act on their own like real people. The human imagination can sometimes be used in the direction of making fiction into reality. In your book, page 294, you advocated the theory that Alcon originated in tulpas. But would you warn people creating a tulpa without a purpose is a dangerous practice, or is it safe as long as it's not connected to the Redeemer complex? What do you think, Mr. Rush?
Well, it's very interesting to hear about anime and manga and how that form of creativity, which is purely Japanese, could go in the direction of tulpas, okay? Tulpas. Now, we want to make sure not to confuse those who are listening. So let's be clear what we're talking about.
Yes.
First of all, I have to ask you this question. Are the tulpas that are created in this way using Tibetan formulas or whatever, which are sort of a higher version of a manga or an anime, do they exist in the virtual or do they exist in the natural?
Well, they say that they exist in their reality. I think there is no their reality, but there is only one reality. I want to believe in this, but they claim that they exist and they automatically speak and act on their own. And sometimes people cannot control the purpose because of the lack of practice. I don't know what, but that's what they say.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be brutal in my response.
Yes.
Okay. It sounds to me, I would like to meet someone who's doing this and have a conversation with them. Fine. But it sounds to me like this is nothing but narcissism and delusional games that people are playing in their minds. And because they're using IT and computer generated imagery, CGI,
yes,
they can do all kinds of things. You know, I've seen the Godzilla monster of Japan as a holographic image.
Mm-hmm.
And they project that Godzilla dragon in a theme park, okay? And people look up and they see it, and it's like it's real, but it's not. Yeah. It's just a holographic construct of artificial intelligence, and that is not a healthy way to use your mind and your creative abilities. It doesn't go anywhere that makes a better world for us. It's delusional, and it's a form of narcissism. Those people who are creating those tulpas think that they are being gods. They are playing God. Do not play God. That's what the technocrats think they're doing. That's their game. And they are psychopaths. So I don't approve. Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much. There are many places in Japan where unique local teachings, animism, Shintoism, and Buddhism are still being transmitted thousands of years. There is one god, Shinto god, Inari, the Japanese kami of foxes, which name means carrying sheaf of cut rice. I'm sorry.
Does it really?
Yeah. This is
Inari.
This being is worshipped in many parts of the country, but its origin is believed to be the goddess Dakini cult, a secret religion of the Sitavana, which means graveyard forest of ancient India. Be that as it may, should we, humanity, now return to the ancient local mythologies, or should we refilter these ancient teachings to extract the essence of universal truth for the whole human species living in today?
Well, as you know, I have great respect for animism, for the wisdom of indigenous people, including the Japanese. I have great respect for the Shinto religion. I have some disagreements with Buddhism, but we won't talk about that today, okay? But I would say, I always say it's both things. If you are Japanese, or you are Greek, or you are German or Spanish, learn about the animism of your people in your past. Learn about the spirits of the places around you. But then go beyond that. You see, that's not enough today. Just going back to that is not enough. The Sophianic way of life and practice is far more sophisticated than that, and far more powerful. And that's where the unity comes. That's where the unity comes. Truth is unity. And the truth is, there is one divine source right here, right now, that is greater than all the others and contains all the others. And that is the living planet goddess herself. So we go to her. She is the ultimate beauty. The ultimate beauty is Sophia. And the beauty of your life unfolds in connection with her life. So there is a focus. That's what it means to be aimed. All these other cults and sects and ancient secret practices, no, I don't do any of that, you see. I'm beyond all that.
Beyond.
And I don't think that that is a path that will actually lead people either to spiritual realization, genuine spiritual realization, or to happiness.
Right. Yes. All right. Thank you very much. This book contains the message of pagan sense of life that we modern humans have almost forgotten today. So I'd like to encourage more Japanese people to read it, and let's ask Mr. Rush many more questions if we get another chance for an interview in near future. Can I interview again sometimes, Mr. Rush?
With pleasure. With pleasure.
Thank you very much. In addition, although this book is quite difficult and complicated, there are authors' extensive annotations and glossary, making it as easy to read as possible for those who are not familiar with this field. For those who want to learn deeper, there are recommended readings and introductions to research books for later learners, making this very thick and large book. If you are interested in all those materials, please pre-order and get a copy of that tremendously influential book. I will keep you updated about the Japanese edition. So at last, do you have any last message for the Japanese readers of your book, Mr. Rush?
Yes, I do. And it concerns this subject of beauty. I often say that the star goddess, Sophia, who is your divine mother, everyone has two mothers. You have your biological mother and you have your divine mother. We all have the same divine mother. I often say that she does not work with laws, even the laws of nature, although all the laws of nature come from her intelligence. All the laws of nature are expressions of the intelligence of the earth. Wouldn't you agree? But for her, they are laws of beauty. They are aesthetic laws. Now, I happen to know, even though I cannot say I penetrated into the psyche of the Japanese people because they are very mysterious, but I know that they have a deep sense of aesthetics and beauty. Look at the tea ceremony. Look at flower ceremony. Look at the temples. Look at the landscape of the temples in Kyoto and everywhere else. So there is a sense of beauty deep inside the Japanese psyche. And that is where I believe you will connect most strongly with the message of my book.
All right. So thank you very much today, Mr. John Lamlash. This is the end of the interview. So please see you again.
Sayonara.
Yes, sayonara. Thank you very much.
Until the next time. Until the next time. Sayonara.
See you next time. Goodbye. 最後までご視聴いただきありがとうございました。翻訳版の発売日につきましては 追ってお知らせいたしますので、よろしければチャンネル登録をお願いいたします。また、本の内容に関してジョン・ラッシュ氏に質問がある方は、後にまたインタビューを試みて、その時に直接まとめて聞いてみますので、ぜひ私にコメントなどでお伝えください。それではまた次の動画でお会いいたしましょう。女神のご加護が皆様にありますように。